Congratulations. You've written a book and you want everybody to know about it. Maybe the book's already out there and you're frustrated because you know it could help so many people if they just knew about it. You've heard about podcast book tours and you're like, this is great. I'm going to send the podcast host my book. That could be a fatal mistake. Hi, I'm Tom Schwab with Interview Valet, and I am here to answer that question that I get from so many authors. Should I send my book to the podcast host? And my answer is always, it depends, right? So let's look at this from the podcast host's perspective, right? They want to have a great interview. They want to add value to their audience. They want to introduce their tribe to the most amazing people. Your job as the guest is to make it easy for them to do that. Now, this doesn't always mean sending them a book. And let me start from the beginning here. One of the common errors I see is people will send the book as a pitch. So they'll get the host's physical address and they'll send them the book with a note that says, here's my book, read it. I'd love to be a guest on your podcast. Well, most people would consider that junk mail. If I haven't asked for it, if I don't know who you are, why would I invest my time, my hours to read this book? You see, because they're getting all kinds of pitches every week. They don't have time to read all of the books. Now, some podcast hosts will read every book cover to cover before they interview a host. And those hosts are great. I admire for what they do, but you think of the hours that will take. So for them, they're going to invest 4 to 5 hours just reading the book to get ready for the interview. Not every podcast host does that. And especially to even decide who you're going to invite on the show. Imagine they get, say, 2 pitches a day of authors that want to be on the show. Well, do you think they're going to read cover to cover 2 books a day, just decide who they might want to have on? It's probably not realistic. You see, if you give them homework, if you make it hard for them to say yes, they'll just say no. Most podcasters, this is not their full-time job. This is a side passion project, something they're doing in addition to their normal business. They don't have the hours and hours to read, especially just to make a decision. So make it easy for them. Earlier on, we've talked about the podcast or the book summary. And this is almost a 1-page sheet that you can do like an executive book summary. This is very helpful to podcast hosts to make decisions. So with that, you put an executive summary on it, some common questions that their audience might have. With that, it just makes it so much easier. Send links if it's already released back to Amazon. Show reviews that it's had. If you've got endorsements, you may want to mention those. But don't start out with, here's my book, read it. I know you're excited about your book. You're proud of your book, but not everybody in the world is. There's millions of books published each year, and nobody has the time to read all of them. I remember one person that came to us, and he was adamant that every podcast host should read his 3-page biography, and that should be in the introduction to them, and that every host should read his book before they interview him. This book was like 8 hours long to read, and he didn't have an Audible version of it. And I'm like, the podcast hosts, there's a reason they're podcast hosts, right? They love Audible. And they're also looking at many things on their phone. So do you know how long a 3-page typewritten summary looks on a phone? They'll fall asleep before they get through there. Other podcast hosts that I know personally are minimalists. If you send them a book without them asking for it, they'll actually be insulted, right? They'll see it as an affront to the environment. It's something that, they're going to have to recycle now, and all that energy that it took. Some people love it on digital form. Other people like the hardcover book. Other ones will like it audible. Some, like I said, just want the summary. So put yourself in the receiver's perspective, the podcast host. Just because you think it's a great gift does not mean they'll think that. So ask, when you introduce yourself, put the book summaries to make it very easy for them. When they invite you on the podcast, always ask, hey, could I send you a copy of the book? Would you like that? And then ask what format they may like. So for some of them, it could be, just send me a digital copy, a PDF. Other ones, hey, could you mail it to this address? Other ones might want an audible version. Some will even say, if you have it available, could you, send me 10 copies? I would love to give this to my audience. So they sort of use it as a promotion themselves. So from that point, it's a win-win. If people are listening to you on a podcast interview, they like what you have to say, and the host can gift them a book. Boy, ultimately, it's not how many books we sell. It's about how many ideas we get out there. And the best podcast book tours, they're not just trying to monetize off the book. They're monetizing off of other things. It could be online courses. It could be coaching, consulting, brands, things like that. So before you just decide that, hey, I'm going to send all my books to all these podcast hosts because they'll be excited to get them, take a deep breath and put yourself in the host position. Sure, you want to get your message out there. Just make sure that you do it thoughtfully because you're leveraging other people's platform. As one host told me, the great Doug Sandler from Nice Guys on Business, he says, you don't have to promote yourself on my podcast. He said, if you do a good job, I will promote you better than you ever could yourself. And that's all that a podcast book tour is really about. Getting out there, getting people to know, like, and trust you, getting them to understand the stories, the passion of why you wrote that book. Guarantee you that works so much better than going from Barnes & Noble to Barnes & Noble. It's scalable, it's fun, and it's how the top authors are launching and promoting their books.